Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the February 27th edition of Beyond the Data. Today I have with me Warner Mendenhall again, attorney from Akron, Ohio, and we'll be talking a little bit about some of the changes that have happened at the CDC over the last few days and how they are going to affect things right now and going forward. The CDC had a meeting on Friday. They put out a lot of announcements that felt really good. Lots of removals of mask mandates. For instance, they actually specifically announced the removal of mask mandates from school buses, which is great news. But it is also a trap. And I'll be going over exactly how it's a trap tonight. But before we get really started, we have a few announcements. The first announcement is that both Warner and I will be at this event in a little less than 3 weeks in Toledo. If you are interested in coming and listening to us, this is going to be kind of a talk of how we got to where we are, what your rights are, and also Monica D. She's actually from Romania. She has experienced what communism looks like and how that all works. And it looks like, I think, a very interesting evening. So if you're interested in that, I have a link up on the Beyond the Data page, and I recommend going and checking it out. And the other announcement, I'll let Warner do it because he's the one that did it. So
I didn't do anything, but Peter McCullough, who many of you know, has provided affidavits in support of our lawsuits against the universities, has agreed to appear on Catherine's show next Sunday night.
And it's a joint thing like last week.
Okay, we have a joint effort now. So to appear on the show with us for an hour or so, maybe a little less. I don't know. Whatever time he has, he's welcome. And that's at 8 o'clock next Sunday night.
Yeah, so we already tune in next week. Hopefully, Facebook won't suppress me that much. They're suppressing me pretty hard today with the advertisement of this one, but lots of people watch afterwards, so that works. All right, I think that's it for our announcement type stuff. So let's just go in on what happened on Friday with the CDC's new announcement. So what I'd like to start with first, though, is what it used to be. So for the most part, we haven't really cared about what the CDC's been doing. It hasn't really mattered in terms of implementation, differential implementation of the rules, because the CDC, for the most part, what we've been enduring has been in schools where they're saying everybody must be masked at all times. The question of whether they can order school buses to force masking, etc. But those orders didn't depend on any kind of metrics. They didn't depend on the CDC's map or anything like that. They just were at all times. And so their old map was based upon what is up on the screen right now, which is about cases per 100,000, which of course are a total mess, and also the percent positivity. And yeah, so I mean, this was pretty ridiculous. They said it was all about watching transmission and all that kind of stuff, and just to make people properly scared and all that. But it didn't matter because it didn't change guidance, and guidance is what schools and businesses and municipalities say that they are following. So guidance is all that really matters, except for when people like Warner actually, can win some cases for us. Then it can change. So let's see. The new map that the CDC is putting out there is now based upon 3 metrics, and those 3 metrics are cases per 100,000 again, and then it's also based upon new hospital admissions with COVID and hospital occupancy with COVID. Now this is bringing lots of flashbacks for me. For people who have been paying attention to me for the last year and a half, specifically, what got me started and out from just the comments was the Ohio map of fear, the Ohio Public Health Advisory System, and how all of those metrics are fatally flawed. And that's what we're looking at again right here. We are looking at exactly those kinds of situations. But this is what they're going to give us now. Now they're going to give us these metrics that should lead to new guidance, which we're supposed to be following. So to look at the implementation of these, this is their new part of how we're supposed to react to all of this stuff. Now at this point is if you have more than 200 cases per 100,000 population, you then go to the bottom part of this. And if you have fewer than 200,000, you're at the top part of this. And then you look at your hospital admissions and hospital occupancy. And because it's the CDC, it always takes the worst possible number. Whichever one's worse, that's the one we're going with. And so in this way, they are arguing that this is all about severe disease. That's what they're focusing on, not on transmission, but only on severe disease, which honestly makes no sense at all to me. How can you, they're connected to each other, obviously, but that's how they're rolling with it. So we have these different things where now the CDC is recommending that masking is only to be done for those counties with what they determine to be high community levels of COVID-19, which is, it sounds great right now, because they also like to, they pointed out that 70% of the country right now, 70% of the population is now in low or medium levels. And it's getting a little distracted here. But what let's see how I want to phrase it. Well, yeah, we'll move on here. One thing I do want to note before moving on, though, is that to notice that when we have a situation of fewer than 200 cases per 100,000, the metrics necessary for hospital occupancy are significantly lower. So if you have high cases, the bar you have to meet is a lot lower.
Of course, I mean, let me jump in here because I mean, this all begs the question as to whether this is legal or not. This is coming off of an executive order that my belief is the president didn't have the power to make, and the CDC, the way the definitions are set up, I don't think they have the power to make these orders or requirements anyway. Digging through the cases and the information, I mean, we kind of did crack the code on a lot of this. That the actual applications for ESSER funds are where they're deriving their authority. So it's actually a contractual obligation for the school districts that have received ESSER funds to follow the quote unquote CDC guidance. So, it took us a while to kind of figure all that out, but we did get that code cracked thanks to a lot of work of people all over the state of Ohio. And I think there's a pretty clear pathway in terms of the litigation, which is unfortunately, it's getting started here. But we need to get answers. We need a lot of different answers. One is, did the president have the authority to do it? The second is, based on the president's executive order, I could actually argue that the CDC lacks the authority to do what it's done. If you actually read carefully what's in the order and compare it to what they did, it doesn't seem to match up. And then thirdly, there is an out. And the out is that school districts have to proceed as far as practicable. That's the strange word they use, practicable. And I've always contended that it is not practicable to violate a state of Ohio law, which does not give school districts the power to mask kids. It violates religious exemptions, and it violates medical exemptions. So, I think the parents in the state of Ohio are very aware of this. They are increasingly aware of the damage it's done to our children, emotionally, educationally, even to some extent physically, because I think the kids have gotten ill because of the use of the masks to a greater extent. So I think parents have definitely awakened in Ohio to the problems that the masking has caused. Catherine, I've been on the phone with some parents in the in Southern Ohio, and the district, Bexley School District was actually requiring double masking of all things. So
Oh yeah, I'd heard about that.
they seem to be, they seem to be, one of the most extreme districts in the state. I think I'm correct in saying that Governor DeWine lives in that district.
No, he doesn't, but Amy Acton does.
Amy Acton does. Okay. Well, I wasn't sure, but I knew there was some connection with some officialdom.
Yes, with the original version of Amy Acton, which again brings back to the whole idea of the map of fear, the original Ohio map of fear, where we are in repeat mode of this. Is what I look at this as, because the way the original Ohio map of fear came into being, it was exactly the same place in uh, in time, in the motion, the natural motion of these of an epidemic, where we are now at a low point. That's blindingly obvious that cases are dropping, hospitalizations are dropping. They're dropping everywhere, regardless of what kind of mandates are in place or vaccinations in place. I mean, we still have Holmes County as the reigning champion. It's still at 88 out of 88 counties in terms of cases. It's also at about, I believe they're still under 18% of the population is fully vaccinated, which is less than half of the next nearest county in the state in terms of vaccination. I mean, they're incredible. Their numbers are fantastic. It absolutely proves that this whole idea of vaccination prevents cases is a lie, which again, the CDC is essentially admitting with this new set of maps. But the other key reason why this particular map bothers me so much is it lulls us into a sense of security in some ways, because with the old map version, a lot more counties in the US were considered high incidence, or whatever they referred to the high levels as. With this one, suddenly most of the people in the US are not under these the highest level where the masks are. So suddenly the CDC can say, "Oh, well, we don't recommend. Our guidance doesn't tell us that we should have masking at low or medium levels." But they would have guidance for specific counties that are at high levels, according to this new map, which right now feels good because everybody's looking at it. Hey, we're not high anymore. The CDC's not, its guidance is no masking. Everything's going to feel good and better and all that. But in reality, since we're at this trough, it only goes up from here. This is not a removal of these mandates. This is just a break. And in fact, Dr. Walensky, she said this quite explicitly on Friday, what they were doing. So here's a clip of her on Friday, why they're doing this and what the plan is. Uh-oh.
We want to give people a break from things like mask wearing when our levels are low, and then have the ability to reach for them again should things get worse in the future. We want to give people.
She tells us this is a break. This is not an end. This is a break. This is only a pause. Again, another part she brought up here in this
It reminds somebody send me the how boa constrictors work. They
yes,
squeeze and then they release.
let go, and then they get a better grip.
And each time you're headed in one direction only, that's getting eaten by that boa constrictor.
Yes, thank you.
Yeah, I thought, yeah, I don't know who said that to me, but thank you. It's a good analogy as to what they're doing. So we're getting released by the boa constrictor, but now they're going to clamp down again in the future.
Yes.
And it's fundamental. I mean, that's what that's what we've been trying to, get the courts to decide on, is that they don't have this power. And we are going to have to fight to get, not just Walensky, but our local health departments, our school boards, our state government, to back down. And, we literally have to get a court to rule that they don't have this power. And, that's what we're trying to do. And if a court won't do it, then we're going to have to take it into our own hands. And you and I have been speaking off and on for weeks now about the constitutional amendment. And, I was hoping we'd have final language by now. So maybe we can get that launched in the next couple of weeks as well. But, a constitutional amendment to make it crystal clear that you cannot impose medical experiments on human beings in the state of Ohio, and you cannot coerce them or threaten them with their jobs or anything like that. So,
I mean, we do, at least one thing that's good in Ohio is we do have the protection of SB 22. I mean, Ohio really is in a much better position than most states because Governor Wine and ODH cannot, or local health departments cannot actually implement these particular rules statewide, because this is actually how the original Map of Fear worked as well. In the original version of it, counties that were at red or purple level were going to be under a mask mandate. I mean, we're 2 years ago right now. I mean, it's crazy. We're doing the exact same thing with the exact same masks in the works with the same metrics. It's absolutely crazy. We're lucky in that they can't do that. But what they can do are the individual school districts and businesses in these locations with high transmission, specifically as we move on through the year. And there is a re-increase in the presence of the virus in the community, because it will come back. That's what viruses do. It doesn't necessarily need to create disease. It's just present. That's what viruses do. It is optimal for a virus to be able to transmit from one person to the next, from one host to the next, while not creating symptoms, because symptoms are a manifestation of our immune response, not of the virus. So the viruses optimally do not want you to get sick. So if everything is working best for all involved, there will always be this virus in our ecosystem. We'll be testing positive, but so long as we don't get ill, does it really matter? To us, it doesn't matter. But unfortunately, to the CDC, it does. Just the presence of that virus or sections of that virus is enough to set this off. I do want to kind of go. Well, one thing I wanted to say, so here, to give an idea of how nice it looks right now and why it's easy to fall into the trap of this is a good change from the previous version, which everybody ignored anyway. It looks good. I mean, Ohio is looking fantastic. A good chunk of the state is low, and most of the rest is medium, both of which are saying, oh, you don't need to mask in public locations. That sounds great. But you can already see when we look at these individual counties that are orange, I'll show in a little bit here, you can already see why these are problematic metrics. Specifically, it's funny when I was putting some of this stuff together and looking back at the exact same discussions I had a year and a half ago about why these kinds of metrics, specifically cases or hospitalizations per 100,000, are extremely punitive to rural counties. For instance, I think I made this slide clearly in September of 2020, and I actually had made a similar one even weeks before that, where it doesn't match at all, where you have a high density of cases. So this was at the time when that very famous ping pong commercial was out by Amy Acton that everybody's so excited about. Well, if you have all these ping pong balls, they'll one go, if you have people close together, then you'll set off all of them, and if they're far apart, then it won't. Well, okay, this map is essentially a ping pong ball map. This is cases per square mile. So you can see Franklin County was just like super dense, and most of the rest of the state was not dense in cases. But the dots on those counties, because of the density or low density of a lot of the counties in the state of Ohio, and the punitive nature of cases per 100,000, which also applies to hospitalizations per 100,000, which is the metric that the CDC is using, you have counties that are extremely rural, very few cases, being worse than dense urban areas. So this is just simply, and in Ohio, for instance, we have 61 counties that have a population of less than 100,000. And when you're using kind of a metric of cases per 100,000 or hospitalizations per 100,000, it is actively punitive against those smaller counties, because each individual case or hospitalization is worth more than counties that are larger. So if you have, for instance, there's Vinton County. I don't think you guys can see my cursor. Vinton County is kind of south central. This particular map, again, was from a year and a half ago. It was based upon the 50 cases per 100,000 metric at the time. But those little tiny numbers, and I don't know if they're particularly visible, those numbers were the number of cases necessary in that particular county that would reach 50 per 100,000. So Vinton County only needed 6.5 cases over a week to reach the 50 per 100,000, because it's so rural. Each one of those cases was far more important. Now, why this is pertinent to what the CDC is doing right now is that you have the metrics earlier for hospitalizations, new hospital admissions. They were looking as low as 10 hospitalizations per 100,000. So that's 1/5 of these numbers. So we're looking at, if Vinton County had 2 people who were identified as COVID patients admitted to the hospital over the course of a week, that would put them above. That would make them high. That would put them into, oh, you need to be masked, and whatever other restrictions they want to come up with. So meanwhile, all the counties that have more than 100,000, actually each one of those, each one of the individual cases or admissions would be worth less than one whole one. Does that make any sense? I don't even remember. I don't know if I'm making sense at this point. Tell me if I am.
I'm trying to track down these comments here a little bit. Somebody did say DeWine was in Bexley area.
He's down in Cedarville.
Okay. and then it is time for an amendment. And then people who are looking for the ESSER funds, I was looking to see if I had a link for that. I mean, that is available online. You can track it by district. Columbus, for example, got over 400 million. Akron got 150 million. So you can see how hard that drives the school boards to comply. And then
with
the
whatever the guidance is.
what's that? Yeah,
With
to comply with the guidance based on the contract that they've signed. And then, I mean, the other problem is that, just like many debates, I mean, we're not having a legal debate about this. They're all hearing from the same firms. They're hearing the same advice. And, there is a difference of opinion out here. I happen to hold it. And, I'd offer to at least have a debate with any of the attorneys involved. I mean, they have a they have a point. I mean, I'm not going to say they don't have a point. There, it's not, but there's different risks here. I mean, right now, first of all, they're saying to the school district that you're going to be totally on the hook. You're totally at risk. If you do anything outside of what the CDC recommends, but that's because those attorneys don't question at all the federal government and the president's executive order. Those attorneys don't question at all the contradictions between the uh, you know, transportation safety and CDC, which have different definitions. Those attorneys are not questioning at all the fact that school buses aren't defined as transportation within the state of Ohio or under the TSA regulations. So those are all issues that are arguable and they need to be argued. That's where we're going. It's there's so many. We're going to be working on this for the next several years, and I'm thankful for all the parents that want to hold the line. And just because the boa constrictor here of the federal government eases up for a minute, well, we need to, we need to keep moving regardless. We're still in that boa constrictor's embrace.
Well, I think that's interesting as well, what you just said there in terms of that. I mean, they're paying attention to what arguments you're making. They definitely are, because one of the things that
They have to. Yeah.
well, not only they have to, but they're reacting to it. They're changing their behavior based upon it, because just what you just said there, where it's like, well, there's an argument about just definitional stuff in terms of school buses and with schools and stuff. Now they're consolidating things like the school buses with everything else, and school masking with everything else. Now they're not separating them as their own
independent issues. I don't know that I've seen that, but you're saying it's just one mandate for buses and school regardless.
What they're saying is, so that's what was announced on Friday. That was
right. Yeah, you're right.
Yeah, so that where they were like, well, why are we removing the mask mandates from schools? Because they've had it since July of last year that schools, regardless of community transmission, have to be masked. So they're removing that and just saying, well, whatever the community is, that's what the school should be. And I'm sure they didn't say it on Friday, but I think it's heavily implied as well. They're going to review the whole transportation mask mandate.
I see a question in the side that I do want to answer here. I mean, the question is, and we're trying to address that here. Are these cases moot if the mandates are lifted? The answer is no, they're not moot, because the power has been claimed. It's been exercised. And just based on what Walensky said on Friday, they intend to reimpose it if necessary. So they've claimed a power that I don't think they have. They are explicitly saying they're going to reimpose it. That kind of statement makes this not moot. So the cases that are pending are important. Other cases, if parents can get organized and bring those cases, they're crucial long term. And it's gonna take these lawsuits take forever. I mean, I'm used to it. I do this, but it will take, our for example, the Highland Tavern case, the first one we filed was filed way back in 2020. It didn't even go through normal discovery or anything because we were dismissed very quickly. Then we went to appeal to the 10th District Court of Appeals, and now we're sitting before the Ohio Supreme Court. Ohio Stands Up supported that case and gave us some financial ability to file the memorandum on jurisdiction. We have asked the court to take it up. The court may not take it up, or they may. If they do, fantastic. Then I get to go make my argument on that. But that's a case that went relatively efficiently through the lower courts, and we're coming up on 18 months. So and then if we win, technically it could go back down. There's other things to argue about. I mean, there's damages. And then there is also, I have another theory about that case, that essentially it's a taking. The courts haven't liked that theory so well, but we may give it another try here. Anyway.
But yeah, I mean, I saw that question as well, and that kind of is my point, because again, I've said it earlier today that when it was specifically the map of fear that made me become an activist, because it is this, you feel like it's okay, it doesn't feel bad, you accept it as being normal, as being a fair way to make rules and react and all that, but it's guaranteed to blow up in your face. And I believe what they are doing right now is they know they have no argument to maintain masking or any of that stuff right now, because or vaccination, pushing vaccination, because it's just not working, and it's kind of obvious, and everybody knows it's super obvious.
It's actually the statistics that are coming out on vaccination. I don't, and you and I don't even like to call it vaccination.
It's a shot.
But I mean, the statistics are absolutely horrible now. I mean, we're seeing data out of England that shows after the third booster, you're into negative efficacy. That means you're more likely to get sick. And you're not just a little more likely, you are far more likely to get sick if you've been shot up 3 times. So, I can't, I mean, one of the things that I wish we had done from the beginning, it just wasn't there. I know that. But I mean, the political will is going to grow. And, what we are literally, and I said this very early on, I mean, simply do not comply. Let's pull the kids from the schools, take them out. We can set up, I know people are worried about how much energy and time homeschooling takes, but the way homeschooling can get set up is that you've got parents in different, areas that can teach different subjects, and these kids can learn, and you can go to work. So there's a, there is a way to organize it. I know that we have an additional, I think homeschooling now is up to 10% across the country. But let's take it to 50%. And let's crash the school, because the teachers union has lost the plot. The Democratic politicians, and I was a Democrat, some of you know that, have lost the plot. We have got to, we do have the power. I mean, we ultimately have the power. And if people will walk off jobs, I mean, and if they'll walk their kids out of the schools, this can change very quickly from a non-legal stance too. So, always remember, I mean, I'm here to help hit it legally, but we need to organize politically. We need to have protests. We need to have alternative media like your show, Catherine. And we need to do everything we can to stop this and get the government back in control.
And I think that's why they're doing this now. That's the thing. I mean, so much of what drives what's going on with you, the cases that you're doing, is because people are angry. They're watching their kids be masked every day. They're watching the nonsense of it, where suddenly school mask mandates were falling away, but the busing mandates were remaining in place, and they logically were angry about it, and they're willing to pay someone like you to go and litigate that. But what happens when all of those mask mandates and things that anger people fall away? When it's not happening actively anymore, people are going to want to go back to normal. Like, we don't like fighting. We don't like being angry. We just want to be left alone. And so,
No, I know. Well, I think
well,
things have changed in a couple of different ways. Somebody said something about the universities too. So this does affect the universities as well, by the way. So we ought to see that. We ought to see these mask mandates dropping everywhere. I have clients in all kinds of situations. And one of the things we have done is sort of drag out negotiations, drag out discussions with their management. And I'm really hopeful that we've gotten to that point because people who've wanted accommodations, one of the accommodations is to wear the masks. And people don't want to wear the masks. The masks are obviously problematic. So I'm hoping that this week, in fact, coming up, we'll see this starting to drop in some of the, for some of the employees around the state of Ohio as well. So we have got a number of things at issue there. So I'm hoping this will clear up, at least give people a little bit of a break. But, we are not going to be abused. And I think people understand that this has been very abusive. It's taken a long time to create the networks, but I think the network can be maintained.
that's
Um,
correct. It needs to be maintained. That's the one thing that concerns me most. I think in Ohio we're in a better situation than many other places in the country because we've had, we have a supposedly Republican governor who has been absolutely on the forefront of the worst abuses, and he's only been reined in because of SB 22. Or otherwise he would be just as bad as Inslee from Washington State and Cuomo in New York and Pritzker in
well,
Illinois. He would be just as bad as them.
we're going to need to push all of these candidates, and I listened briefly to the CPAC talk that Trump gave today, and if Trump is running, we need to make sure that we are objecting loudly to any idea of mandates that we're, that this has to be, if anybody takes one of these shots, that it has to be based on informed consent. And we can't, I've talked about this before, we can't even have informed consent if we have suppression of information like we've got. The CDC ought to be telling us right now that, look, two shots aren't really effective. It falls under the threshold even for approving a vaccine at this point. Three shots destroy your immunity, so you're more likely to get sick. That's the information we ought to be getting. It ought to be, and if they don't want to put it out, they ought to at least let people like Peter McCullough argue it. We have great doctors. We ought to at least be able to have these debates. We don't even have the debates in our mainstream media at all.
Well, there was no debate on Friday. It was amazing. First of all, the only intervention that they spoke about the entire time as being truly controlling the virus is masking. That was it. That was the only thing they gave. And actually, one of the reporters asked about why is vaccine status not included in these metrics, and the answer that Dr. Walensky gave was that, well, it kind of is involved because if you have taken the vaccine, then you're less likely to have severe disease.
Yeah, but
So
it's not. You're right, because it doesn't matter. You're still transmitting it. It's so ridiculous at this point.
well, they
Let-
say
let-
they're not claiming that they specifically stepped away from controlling transmission to caring about what the what
Severity.
severe disease is. But of course, that what they're measuring isn't even severe disease. I actually have another clip here that was on many
Hey,
levels.
before you hit that real quick, there's some stuff coming out about the shot or the colleges and stuff. I mean, we do need to create a list of colleges that are not requiring the shot and not doing the masking. That's a project. I see somebody put up Walsh College in North Canton as one of those. And I think Hillsdale up in Michigan. But and we're going to need to, we're going to need to identify all these parallel structures, all these parallel places you can go and live your life like an American.
Or
Uh,
better yet, that you can win your cases and set.
well, I'm working on that too. So, and then, we need to be aware of things like the Inter-University Council in Ohio, which has been really disastrous for all of us. And it's guiding all the big state schools. And we need to identify who these people are. And we need to make sure that they know that we object to what's going on here strongly. And then we have state legislators that, Catherine, we've been in touch with some state legislatures. And we have state legislators, senators, representatives that are open to discussion and are intend to do something about some of this. So, let's pay attention to that and make sure that that happens in the next year.
Well, of course, I mean, in Ohio politics, I don't believe that anything that is acting directly for health freedom will make it anywhere with this particular legislature until after the election, because they're just not going to touch it. from if it's outside the direct health freedom movement, maybe they'll do it, but I have zero hope in the legislature to move anything directly related to it. I think really the way to do it is with your litigation or with a constitutional amendment or something of that nature. Do not involve the or do not hope for much from the legislature.
I agree. But I mean, and that is a good point. I mean, and things like a constitutional amendment in particular, I view it as an organizing principle. So we can get people together, keep our networks going. People have got something to do, got something to talk about. So I think that's an important organizing principle for where we go forward in the next year or two, even possibly. I know there's limited time this year, but we can start that, petitioning right now.
Yes. I just totally lost what I wanted to say.
Well, I mean, the other thing that I would say, I mean, I do think that as this stuff fails, I mean, and unfortunately,
Which stuff fails?
well, as the more we see the shots failing and the more obvious that gets, I mean, look, we are seeing, I've talked about this every time I get on, but I mean, literally every day we're hearing of increased injuries and problems. And I'm not talking about the Bears system. That's a whole other thing. And I mean, that should have been clear from day one. But I'm just hearing so many horrific backs, and I hate to say backs, but shot injured people. It's just a constant. And I mean, there were some young people who developed some cancers recently. I mean, and I just don't. I'm 60 years old, just turned 60. You know that. I just, I've lived a long life. I just don't hear about 20-year-olds with cancer. I just don't usually hear that. It's very, very, very rare.
Or aneurysms.
Or heart injured. And now all of a sudden that's something I'm hearing about on a regular basis. And that's not, I mean, not to speak of older folks and what's going on with them. No, I'm horrified. I mean, I have lived experience. You can look around in your life and see what's happening to people. And it seems to me the more shots they've got, the more danger they're in, period. So, the folks who got one and stopped, thank God. The folks who understood and were able to, not get shot up, great. But if you think boosters or anything else is going to help you, you are, good luck, I guess.
Fortunately, I mean that's part of the whole concept behind this new map system as well, because and this is the frustrating thing for me as well. They say a lot of stuff that is provably false, but they keep repeating it and they keep trying to tie things that we know right now, because we just experienced Omicron and you have all these people who have been vaccinated who have gotten Omicron and well, clearly it's not preventing transmission, but we're going to have, the next months where things will be eased and they'll probably introduce Novavax or something of that nature, or figure out a new method of of kind of hiding how hiding how it doesn't prevent infection, so that and keep us, asleep. We're not active. Not, I mean, hopefully in Ohio, I am hopeful that people are going to be engaged enough to continue to connect and fight it through the summer. I don't know about other states, quite frankly, but it is this it is that boa constrictor situation. If they're letting go, seemingly letting go, but when cases begin to increase, hospitalizations increase, they are going to use it, and they are going to continue with the narrative that they put out there on Friday, which is, well, vaccinations lower hospitalizations, even though we know it's not true. Well, yes and no, because
That's starting to fail. I mean, that's definitely starting to fail.
yes and no. Here's that question I wanted to play, and I wanted to talk a little bit about.
Sorry, I interrupted you. Somebody did mention Olmstead claims, the ADA. We're looking at ADA issues too. Just to respond to some of our comments. Go ahead and play yours.
Yeah. All right. So this is a question from a Stat News reporter, and I took her whole question as well, just so you can hear how she asks this really great question. And
Hi, thank you very much for taking the question. I think this is going to be an irritating question, but when you talk about the metrics about the percentage of people in hospital beds who are there because of COVID, is that for COVID or with COVID? I mean, will the with COVID people also be part of those populations? Helen, that's a great question. We have spent a lot of time thinking about this. And let me tell you sort of where we landed and why. First, we are considering anybody in a hospital bed with COVID, regardless of their reason for admission. And the reason that we landed there is multifold. First, many jurisdictions can't differentiate. So that was important for us to recognize and realize. Second, whether or not a patient is admitted with COVID or for COVID, they increase the hospital capacity and they're resource intensive. They require an isolation bed, they require PPE, they probably require a higher staff ratio. And so they are more resource intensive, and they do take a COVID bed potentially from someone else. Interestingly as well, as we have less and less COVID in certain communities, the amount of people who are coming into the hospital with COVID will necessarily decrease. We will not have as many people walking around asymptomatically because there will just be less disease out there. So increasingly, as we have less disease in the community, we anticipate that more of the people who are coming into the hospital are going to be coming in because of COVID. And then finally, as we have even less disease in the community, we anticipate that not every hospital is going to screen every patient for COVID as they walk in the door, especially if we have less and less disease in the community. And when that happens, we won't actually be able to differentiate. In fact, people who are coming in who are tested will necessarily be coming in with for COVID. So for all of those reasons, comprehensively, we decided to stay with anybody coming in with a COVID diagnosis.
Well, you may have to translate a little bit of that for me, Kathy. I heard most of it. I mean, you know what? I mean, something that just sort of hits me every time I hear them speak is we're being treated like livestock.
yes,
We're not
yes,
being treated like human beings. This is how you treat chickens and pigs. And, they'll use crappy vaccines on our livestock, and, it'll do whatever it does. But I mean, that's, this weird testing regime. I mean, we got to get beyond that. We got to get beyond this. And let's just name it. I mean, lockdowns, that's a prison term. So and the way the vaccines are being implemented, it's like livestock are vaccinated. So we're not being treated in the very careful, humane way, that human beings should be treated. And the whole system is broken down. I mean, we know that the regulatory capture at every level, FDA, but the regulatory capture of the doctors is really something to behold, the lack of independence there. And then let's remember too, of all the hospitals that have closed down, Doctors Hospital in Massillon, which I do have some people trying to buy that right now. And then, Lakewood Hospital. And, all the small hospitals, every one of us knows of small hospitals in our communities that have been shut down. We've reduced our hospital capacity by 30% since the 1970s. So, they're talking about capacity and they're over capacity and they're stressed. Well, they've been cutting down hospital capacity to increase profits for 40 years. And, we need to recognize what's happened. Those are things we need to be aware of. We've gone to this very profitable system. Even Cleveland Clinic, which is not for profit, at $1.2 billion in net revenue. So, it's a money thing all the way now. And there is not, the humanity has seemed to have been drained from the medical profession. And I mean, not obviously not 100%, but it's just horrendous watching what's happening and how people are being treated. And I'm tired of I'm tired of our nation and our people being treated like livestock.
Oh, but you've kind of anticipated some of the stuff I have here.
Did I? Okay.
So here's some fun stuff.
Yeah.
Again, this is a lot of this stuff is old. I did this a while ago because we're now still dealing with the same issues. This particular graphic I made at the end of December or mid-December or in December, while in Cuyahoga County, which is in Region 2, which is Northeast Ohio, Cleveland Clinic and Metro and UH were all coming out and talking about how their hospitals were being overwhelmed with COVID patients and the world was ending. And I have this data up to today as well, but I didn't have the chance to make the new data. But so here's the interesting thing. Again, the CDC is talking about all of these metrics are all about severity and protecting our hospital capacity and all that kind of stuff. Well, the data that I'm showing here is going back all the way to May of 2021. That yellow line is the total capacity, or not total capacity, that's total usage. So that's the number of people in beds. And that's, it's fluctuating through the week. In midweek, there are more people in the hospital. Weekends, fewer people in the hospital. And I do have two different axes here. The COVID occupancy is significantly lower than it looks on this graph, but I wanted to bring them closer together so you can see how they mirror each other. What's interesting is that the non-COVID occupancy dropped in the exact same manner as COVID occupancy increased, meaning total occupancy never changed. So these COVID hospitalizations are not additional. They're replacing other hospitalizations. So what Dr. Walensky was just talking about is definitely hospital systems definitely taking advantage of the situation of calling somebody a COVID patient. Because as she says, well, it doesn't matter if it's from or with, because then you have to have isolation and PPE and all this expensive stuff that you have to add on with fewer and fewer providers and more money given because of it. And we know that they're doing it because this is happening. How is it possible that those two things are equal, if not for people coming in with COVID? It's right there. So my favorite one as well is this particular statement. Again, I made this back in December when they made it, where the COVID pandemic continues to challenge healthcare providers globally and nationally, including Cleveland Clinic, the Metro Health System, and university hospitals, resulting in yet another surge in the number of COVID-19 patients. As we continue to navigate the pandemic and adjust to the changing healthcare needs of our patients, our health systems are seeing unprecedented demand for inpatient care across our facilities. That yellow line is the usage from May through December. Can you point out the unprecedented demand here?
Right. And let's say there is unprecedented demand.
Don't see it.
The trillions of dollars that we're spending, why aren't we reopening some of these hospitals and building capacity instead of firing nurses and doctors?
Because they don't need the extra, because their capacity, their occupancy, total occupancy does not change. Not through all of this, not through the lowest point in the pandemic to the very highest point in the pandemic. Their occupancy hasn't budged. And the thing is if you listen to what Dr. Walensky was talking about, they're going to use exactly this information. So right there, the second metric was occupancy, the fraction of hospitalizations that are considered COVID. So right here, we already see that, well, the fraction increases, but the occupancy stays the same. Mm-hmm. And this is something that I went over, I went over this again. These are really, really old slides. This lovely situation in Ohio with the ICU bed occupancy was one of our metrics. And this is the exact same metric that the CDC is now using, except for instead of ICU occupancy, it's inpatient bed occupancy, but the concept behind it remains the same, because you're looking at the fraction that is considered COVID out of what is occupied and or staffed. You have some funny math. So I made up this graphic over a year ago for the same reason, where if you have an imaginary ICU that has 100 beds, or just consider any hospital, whatever, I have 100 beds and 2 of them are occupied. One is with a COVID patient, one is with a non-COVID patient. Now, any rational person like us would look at this situation and say, well, there's 100 beds. And there's one person who's COVID positive. That's 1%, right? That's 1% of beds are being used by a COVID person, right? Oh. That's not how it works. That's not how it worked in the state of Ohio, and that is not how it's going to work with the CDC. When the CDC looks at these numbers at this hospital, this fictional little hospital I've made, they would call this 50% occupancy. 50% is occupied by a COVID positive patient. And this really happens. This was actual data from Region 8, which is Southern Ohio. This happened last year, a little over a year ago. I've got the dates up there. You can go back and time and look at these numbers and download these numbers, and they're there to be seen. And this is the math that they use. These are the specific numbers of beds that are officially available, and how many were officially COVID positive, COVID negative. Normal people math at this point would have said that 36% of the beds were occupied by COVID, but that's not what the state was reporting. They were reporting 48.3%. So, and this is what CDC is doing. This is what they're going to do to change their guidance and direct their guidance to individual counties, to school districts, to all that kind of stuff. And it is pretty nonsense as well. The CDC put out their own CSV file, their own data file, when they made this announcement on Friday, and I downloaded it and I looked at it. And first of all, it makes no sense to me at all. I mean, I have no idea where they're getting this data from. It does not match up with Ohio numbers at all. I'm sitting here scratching my head. They're just pulling it out of I don't know where. The sun does not shine there, that's for sure. But this is the kind of stuff that's going on with that new metric situation that they have set up. Logan County is the most interesting one. Just makes you scratch your head. Logan County is considered at the highest level. The guidance is that they should all be masking indoors right now. So if anybody wants to follow that, the schools want to follow that, because of ESSER funds or whatever their encouragement is. Logan County currently has officially 20% of their inpatient beds are COVID. I have no idea where they're getting this number from. I have no idea. I really don't. The Ohio Hospital Association, they have they have their occupancy data, and they've broken the state down into 8 different regions. And I expected to see those 8 different regions reflected in this data, but that's not what happened. Only one region is the region around Cincinnati. That's all working as a unit, but all over the rest of the state, it's random. I can't figure it out. Logan County's on its own, 20% hospital utilization, but only 2.2 new hospital admissions, and the cases per 100,000 are also low. But it doesn't matter because they've got this percent utilization. They're high. Just like, so this is why these gains are so important, because Logan County and anyone else will be enduring this when this goes on further, because we know as COVID hospitalizations rise, normal hospitalizations will fall because people are just simply coming in with COVID.
Let me answer a question here. Somebody talked about how long are they tied to the funds. The funds are tied by contract, so it's the entire time. I mean, until those funds are used up and the contract is over, they're tied to those. But I do want to get to something you're saying about the statistics. I mean, that was something I understood was supposed to happen originally in terms of the idea of the efficacy of the shot, was that the CDC rules, or National Institute of Health rules, they were supposed to use the absolute number, and that was a requirement to use the absolute number. Do you know about that? Is that correct? I know I haven't.
I've never heard of that. Well, no, everything I've ever seen the CDC do or Ohio do has always been relative numbers. They like playing relative number games. That's how they get away with a lot of the ridiculous things that they're saying.
That's why I'm pointing this out. I know I have this somewhere. I was looking in my notebook here, but I can't figure out where it is. But in essence, it is this, that you're supposed to use absolute numbers when you're telling the public about efficacy. And the reason they didn't do it is because an absolute number would have taken the efficacy from, let's say you have a 0.1% chance of dying from COVID. That shot really only takes it to, okay, well, you have a 0.2% chance. That's the idea behind an absolute number. So it's such a tiny movement in terms of risk that's how that's how they were supposed to communicate it to us initially. And honestly, why they didn't do it, because what they would say is moving from 0.1 to 0.2 is 100% improvement.
Yeah.
That's why they came up with those numbers, and that's why they used it that way, because really moving from 0.1 to 0.2 to most people would be like, well, that's not worth it, obviously.
Well, the other way around, 0.2 to 0.1, but yeah.
Thank you, to be straight here.
Yeah, so that's relative risk reduction and absolute risk reduction. And actually, this is something that's been going on for a very, very, very long time. This is how they do it with the older vaccines as well. This is how they drive that. That's the whole thing with the flu vaccines. They've been doing this forever with the flu vaccines, where they talk about the relative risk reduction, not the absolute. I don't know of any place where they're actually supposed to use. I mean, yes.
Here, I've got it up right here. I mean, here it is. Absolute risk reduction. Absolute risk reduction, also called risk difference, is the most useful way of presenting research results to help in your decision making. Well, no kidding.
They don't use it. They do not. They do not use it. They've always done that, and it's not just with COVID. They've been using that for the same manipulative techniques with flu vaccines in particular. Yeah, no, that's how they do it. Exactly that, where you have as you said, you 0.2% of dying. Well, the flu vaccine or the COVID vaccine, under their very special manipulations, might drop you down to 0.1, and that's how they come up with it's 100% effective. It's like,
well, that I was reading from one of the NIH websites
there, so. Well, you need to send that to me, because that's pretty funny, because that's how they do their manipulations. That's how they do it. That's how they've done it, and there's, like I said before, I mean, this is a bad case of deja vu for me. I know how this game is played. They've played this now for a couple of years. There was a question in here that that Ohio reporting was the testing ground for the new nationwide data cluster. Yes, that is definitely my belief. We also definitely were ground zero for a uh, large psychological test run I talked with Jason Hedges about this as well. Both of us had seen this uh, summer of 2020. They were using psychological manipulation techniques involved in a Yale study in Ohio the summer of 2020. They were using the exact things that were in that study in Ohio. I definitely believe that we are test bunnies in this state. All right.
Well, we've been on for an hour here.
I've killed my. I've said my piece.
Yeah.
So good.
Elizabeth Daniels, somebody said something. She said something about how long are they tied to the ESSER funds. I mean, it's important for these schools to stand up and and to look at it through a different lens and challenge it. I think once they've completed their contractual obligations, then they can get out from under it. But it's an interesting question. I'm not 100% sure whether it ties them to CDC recommendations for some kind of infinite period of time in the future. But I'll try to take a look at that next time I'm looking at those ESSER contracts.
Well, one of the other things that was talked about on Friday in what they were saying is that this is very clearly in perpetuity. That they were actually talking. Somebody had asked the question about the flu.
Yeah.
The flu and things of that nature. And the answer was in the way of, yeah, we'd like to implement these things for other diseases as well. This is, if you listen to it wasn't that long of a press conference. I think it was around 35 minutes or so, including questions. And it might be worth if you got the time and you can tape your brain together and it's definitely worth listening to understand where they're going to drive this in the summer for the southern states and again for all of us in the fall. It needs to be fought with everything we've got, and everything we've got is really you, right?
Bridget put a comment up about absolute risk reduction, that it should be applied to masks as well. It's supposed to be applied to all interpretation of medical data. So across the board. So yes, masks, injections, whatever you're doing medically to understand it, you have to look at what the overall population effect is. And if it's this teeny tiny effect, and then we also know the other thing we should look at is the risks, the absolute risks that have occurred on the other side of this. So we've seen, a drug addiction spike, we've seen a suicide spike, we've seen all kinds of developmental delays, especially with the young children. We talked about that a week ago, I think. So, I mean, the risk reward on this is so clear, so clearly against any shots. And it's just becoming very compelling. I just hope that it starts to break through to, I don't know that we're at a majority, Catherine. I mean, I hope it breaks through to a majority at some point here.
Well, I don't think we're at a majority at this point in time. I think that it's the loosening of the boa constrictor, and those people who might have started to question right now, they're trying to make slide back into somnolence there. I do think that's a lot of the reasoning behind why they're doing it. And obviously the State of the Union is coming up and you got to make them feel good and all that kind of stuff. But they're just going to tighten down aggressively later. And that's the trick, is keeping people involved. Actually, with what you just said there, I saw an article today talking about Miss C, right? Miss
No,
C,
I'm sorry.
sorry?
Well, I didn't hear that. I'm sorry.
There was an article today talking about Miss C, the
Oh, yeah, right.
yeah, so the disease that's affecting children, supposedly affecting children after a COVID uh, diagnosis. And I mean, Miss C is not completely not familiar to me. It is an overreaction of a person's immune system. It's the immune system of the individual, and there's a Miss A as well for adults. Misfires and causes inflammation throughout the body, and that inflammation can damage your organs. But it is a misfiring of the immune system. It is not an effect of the virus itself. Well, it turns out that Miss C has been started to be reported after vaccinations, which is kind of obvious because it's clearly the spike protein that is stimulating certain people's immune systems to overreact. And what was amazing to me was the way this article was written was in the way of, it's so super rare. It's basically not happened at all. Don't worry about it. Don't think about it. Meanwhile, even one singular case of Miss C after a COVID diagnosis has been hyped now for 2 years. I mean, it's the dichotomy between caused by the virus and caused by the vaccine is amazing. And in fact, actually, in that particular article, they were even trying to say, well, these kids, they actually caught COVID just before they got the vaccine. So actually, this Miss C is because they were infected by COVID right before they were vaccinated. So it's not the vaccine, it's we didn't get to them fast enough.
Yeah, can I put a chat up here on the link to the Inter-University Council? Is that I'm not seeing how I can chat.
So at the top right, there's a box that says comments.
Okay.
And if you click there, there should be a box at the bottom that says post a comment. No?
I don't know why I'm not getting it. No, nothing at all.
Well, okay. So the other thing you can do is type it into the private chat, and I can put it in for sure.
Okay. I just want to give people a link. Somebody asked about, a little more information about the Inter-University Council. This is set up by Ohio State University. It's driving it. And that's I'll just send you a link. We need to become aware of this. The head of it is making a bunch of money. It's hundreds of thousands of dollars. We've never even heard of the guy. Yeah, it's funded through Ohio State University. It affects most of the state schools, maybe all of them. I mean, University of Akron, Youngstown, Toledo, OU, Kent State, Miami. I mean, UC, Central State, Cleveland State, Shawnee State, Wright State, Bowling Green, Northeast Ohio Medical University. All of those.
Very familiar, that list. I mean, how many of those are you suing?
Well, we're just going down the list.
Now you know who's next on your list.
Well, yeah, we've hit of these in the list. I guess we've hit almost half of them. So, Wright State, UC, so OU, Bowling Green, and missing
Miami.
But no, we've hit half of them, I guess. So
there's nothing suspicious there, nothing at all.
Yeah, but I mean, it's. Oh, I'll tell you what. I'm just going to tell the folks out here. I am infuriated by their pleadings. They come back and they're writing lies to the court. They are saying that there's an approved vaccine available for these students to take. They are literally saying it. And I mean, I'm like, this is absolutely false. We've proven it false over and over. It is just infuriating. The attorneys who are defending the universities are so blue-pilled, I guess, that they're not even arguing fact. So I mean, obviously, we're going to be pointing that out. But I mean, it's just stunning. I mean, I can't. We have a duty as lawyers. I don't. Probably people think of lawyers as unethical or whatever, but we have ethical duties to the court to be accurate in terms of what we're saying. So to see attorneys actually write complete falsehoods that then I have to go and or my crew, I don't want to take all the credit here. I got tons of people working with me. The fact that we have to counteract that and counteract a pure falsehood. And then on top of that, I mean, my view of that is, you're supposed to get sanctioned, meaning fined if you purposefully mislead the court on either a case or a fact or whatever it is. And so I'm curious to see whether judges will react to it.
Well, that
And
requires the judges actually hearing.
I know. We have such a hurdle. It's such a, it's a delusion that it really is that mass formation that they talk about. I mean, we're trying to fight our way through it, and the truth, I mean, for the truth to be so obscured, and for the truth, and lawyers really, we have to live there. I mean, we are required ethically to be truthful. We can have a difference of opinion about what the truth means, but those facts, the fact that I'm having to go in and establish that it's a fact that Comirnaty is not available to these students is just ridiculous. So anyway, I don't know. That's my rant for the evening. Yeah, I got to get out of here. I've got to get some more work done tonight. I've got, you guys who are out there listening, I promise, I overpromise. I'm sorry we're moving slower than what we think at most times, but I'll tell you some things that happened. I'm gonna keep going a little bit here. When we hear from, one of the things that's happened is some of the military stuff is really getting intense. Okay. So we've got, I absolutely, we are doing that work right now pro bono, but we've had to step up and advise some military people here in Ohio. We have Wright Patterson down in Dayton. We've got other military people around the state. So I'm just going to apologize again and again and again for not meeting the deadlines that I think I can meet, because I said it with all with all plans to get stuff done. But like this week, some of the military stuff sort of rose up, and we have we just have emergencies that are coming up for people, and I'm constantly triaging, and it's very hard, and I try to set what I think are reasonable timelines, and then I get blown out. But I just want people to understand we do have kind of some emergency situations going on out there, and and then the military stuff is stunning to me. I mean, we are purging our military of the strongly religious and strongly principled people, that's the wrong thing to do. So lots of things upset me. That one does too.
Well, I'm just so glad that you are here at all, because before you, there was nothing. There was no one fighting for it, and it needs to be fought through the summer. The different Ohio Stands Up fundraisers. People go to them, even though it feels like things are going back to normal. Understand they are not going back to normal. They're just loosening the coils just for a little bit, and then they're squeezing again. So we need.
And Catherine, I don't want to take all the credit. We've got so many people now that are starting to get activated. Yeah. If you're working for Cleveland Metro, there's a great lawyer on that, John Troyer. He's got a meeting Monday night with the Metro folks. So please reach out on that. I know about a couple hundred people are supposed to be at that. So, you can see there's other lawyers out here working, doing great work. And you'll have to get them on your show because it is definitely, they're out there, they're working. We've got 40 lawyers right now that are just pouring their heart into this. So, it's definitely growing, and I hopefully, their efforts, and we're trying to compare notes and do the best we can, and learn from each other and learn from our, successes and failures. So I can't thank all those lawyers enough who signed up and are willing to take on this work.
All right. So I think we're good for tonight. Anything last that you want to say, or are you good?
I got to shut up and get back to work. It's late, and I got
All
to do.
right. Thank you, everyone, for joining us tonight. Good night.
Yeah.